is that they're all currently based overseas. You know, they were born in Singapore, Malaysia, they were brought up here as well. And so today's panel is mostly not just about AAA, but how do you think beyond Singapore in terms of career? So take it away.
Okay, can everyone hear me? No? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, because I
cannot.
just want,
Okay, can see you.
So mic test, everyone. I think Ling is muted. Hui is muted.
Yes, hi.
Okay.
Me.
Hi, hey.
Yes, loud and clear. Sonic, you want to check? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yes, I can hear you. All right, so we're all live. All right, cool. So, yes, welcome everyone. I think we have 120 participants today. Don't let that stress you out. Right now, we're actually going into a panel that's talking about the world of game dev outside of Southeast Asia, where we are probably most of the attendees are based. And I really like to thank all the guests today for joining us, taking time out of their busy schedules and sharing their valuable experience with this audience and with me. Yes, I think it's it's a good thing to start off with introductions. I know you guys, some of you know who they are and me, but then I think it's good to kind of go through the list and let everyone introduce themselves in their own words. Shall we start from Zong Hui? Oh, Sonic, you're muted. You're muted. You have to unmute.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Yes,
so I started out in the industry by working on indie games, and I used it to enter Ubisoft back when I was in Singapore. And then after I left Singapore, I tried freelancing and working on indie games for a year. And right now I'm in Arc System Works, working on Guilty Gear. So
cool.
That's my background in the game industry.
Okay. Right. Like Guilty Gear, that is amazing. Like I am a super fan of Guilty Gear, even though I suck at fighting games. Right. And then next up, I think let's go to Hui.
Hi everyone, I'm Hui. I went to Digipen US for school, and then about 3 years ago I started working at Respawn. Now I'm a software engineer working on Apex Legends. I actually flew back to Singapore a few months ago, and I'm working remote for them currently. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Mei Ling?
Hey everyone, so I'm Mei Ling, working with Google Stadia in Montreal, Canada. I started working in the industry back in Malaysia, worked for a bit in Singapore with Ubisoft, and then I moved around with Ubisoft to France, to Montreal, and this is where I've made my home for the past 7 years.
Awesome.
Nice to meet all of you.
Nice to meet you too. Yes, and then I guess I will end off because yeah, some of you guys know who I am, but I think most of you don't. My name is Xuan Ming. I usually go by the moniker XM, so you can call me that. And I started off in the indie scene in Singapore with Boom Zap Entertainment, and worked there for about 7 years. Eventually, I stopped and started teaching a lot in NTU, Singapore Polytechnic, and NUS. And then more recently, before I went overseas, I was working with Landshard Games on a really cool mobile project that they were working on. And then I got the opportunity to come to Sweden to work with the Arctic Studio in the Paradox Group on a really cool project, which I can't talk about, but I assure you it is awesome. And that's how I ended up here in the beyond the walls of in the halls of the Night King. But yes, enough about me. Let's go on to more of the questions of this panel that I've prepared. Okay, So we're all kind of outside of Singapore right now, right? With the exception of the Hui, who flew back to Singapore. And I think a lot of young developers in Singapore would like to kind of know, how did you get to this amazing place that you are right now? How did you kind of like get to live the dream of working for a large company that made a lot of the games, of course, that we play growing up, right? Let's start with the Hui, right? You started fresh off Digipen. Yes, how did this whole thing happen?
Yeah, so as I mentioned just now, I went to Digipen US for school. So I went there for 4 years, and it was a pretty valuable learning experience for me. I think the strongest thing you get out of Digipen is that you get to get together with a group of people, like-minded people, right, who all are passionate about making games in school. And so then that really gives you great portfolio pieces to put in your portfolio when you're applying to companies. And so how I got my job at Respawn, I actually, well, first of all, I did my internship. Between my junior and senior year, I did my internship at Treyarch. That one I just applied on their website and got the internship, and that was great. Learned a lot there. And then for Respawn, they come to Digipen quite often, and then when they do go to Digipen, they have on-site interviews. They actually like sort of just hold like short 20-minute sessions with students there. I couldn't get a spot on the list, so I actually went on the website and I sent them an email. And I said, hey, Respawn, like, are you guys still hiring? And luckily for me, at the time, they were going through a wave of hiring a bunch of software engineers. And so then they considered me. I flew down to LA for the interview. It was awful. There was like an hour and a half of traffic trying to get from the airport to the office. It was crazy. But yeah, I did an interview, and that's how I got my job there.
Nice. Maybe let's also talk about, rewind it a little bit back. But you did your course in Digipen, but you did it in the United States. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so I sort of knew that I wanted to do my education overseas. And actually having Digipen in Singapore sort of gave me the courage to do it, because in my head, it was like, oh, if there's one in Singapore, then it must be legit, I guess, sort of the idea. And yeah, when I was there, actually, I did meet quite a few Singaporeans, a handful who did their first few years in Singapore, and then they transferred over to the US for their last year. Yeah, I think the idea is that if you graduate from a school in the US, from a college in the US, you get to work on your student visa for 1 year, and you can extend for 2 to 3 years depending on your field. So STEM extension is what it's called: science, technology, engineering, and maths, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I did. So I was actually on my student visa for these past 3 years, actually. Yeah.
Does it extend to design, or is it only programmers?
I am not sure. I do believe it extends to designers, but because I think as long as you're in like games, you're considered STEM, but
right.
I'm not super sure.
Right. I did check with Rahul, the design chair of Digipen Singapore, about this, and I think the system right now is that in your your 5th semester in your 2nd year, there is a semester that you spend in the US campus. That is part of the course. But some students can apply to transfer to the US campus to do their final year, which is what the Hui is talking about. And then if you do that, you actually have a work visa, like a student visa that kind of extends beyond your studying years after you graduate for like 1 to 2 years. And you can use that time to kind of explore the job market in the US and get employed. So that is what the Hui was talking about. It's still in the course today. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure you can write to Digipen and they'll be able to answer your questions. Not sure if there's any Digipen teachers here today in this talk, but that's definitely something that I know is available right now. Okay, let's kind of move on to Zong Hui. Just a kind of like a small talking point. I kind of know Zong Hui before he left Singapore. So yes, we actually kind of know each other from the fighting game community, and like that was kind of fun. Although I'm terrible at it at fighting games, but he's a really fun guy to hang out with. Before he left Singapore, he was looking around for a job in Singapore, and then eventually he kind of found his way in Arc System Works. How did that happen? What's the journey between that job hunt and you ending up at the maker of Guilty Gear?
So first, there's two reasons. First, I'm okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear loud and clear.
So the first reason is I mean, I'm part of like the FGC in Singapore. I play lots of fighting games like Guilty Gear and Street Fighter. And the other reason is because I was working on this game called GameStart Pixel Battle back in 2015. I was going around different companies in Singapore asking for IPs that I could use to put in the game. And I wanted to put Guilty Gear characters in the game as well. So there was once I went down to their office and asked if I could use like Guilty Gear characters. But at that time they thought it's a fan game, it's not official, so it couldn't get through. But at that point the CEO told me you can try to apply here if you want to. So that's the second reason. So like I think the following year I started thinking about it and I tried applying by talking to one of their staff, and one of them is from Singapore as well. So I arranged for an interview online and I managed to get in.
So the whole interview process was online?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but even
Awesome.
before the interview, I already went down and kind of had a meeting with them for an hour about the
Right.
game. Yeah, so
okay.
they seen me in person before, so I guess that helps with the interview process.
Right. Oh, then the other guy there from Singapore, how long has he been there for before you arrived?
I think about a year or two before I joined.
Oh, okay. Awesome. But is he also a designer?
He's more on the publishing side.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. And before I drag on too long, Mei-Ling, yes, last but not least, wow, Google. That's a place that a lot of people want to go, even outside of games, right? So how did Google happen?
Wow, that's it's a pretty long path. I never thought I would be able to end up at Google of all places, because my dream was to just start making games, right? Like you wouldn't think that a company like Google would even think about venturing into games, but I think it makes sense, right? Like when you're trying to diversify your reach and your portfolio, that games is such a huge industry that you can't ignore it. I completed my studies and I started my career in in KL in Malaysia. I know that there's been a lot of key members who have been really active in the Malaysian industry to try to grow it for such a long time. And I think I was really fortunate to be able to get even a first job in the games industry, get a foot in the door working there. And I think my time spent with local companies like Game Brains, with Phoenix Game Studios, really helped build my foundation in games development, right? But I think the big break kind of came with working with Ubisoft when they first opened up in Singapore, and I think that's where the opportunity and the networking really helped open more doors to be able to move out of Southeast Asia to begin with. And I think from there it was just a lot of opportunities being given, a lot of sponsorship being given by people who were my managers, people who saw potential in this person who just came from halfway across the world, who's never really had the same exposure necessarily to games development as them. But I'm really fortunate and thankful for the opportunity that all the people who have played a huge role in helping my career get here. And that's something that I think matters more than anything, and is a bit of an unspoken rule as well in the games industry, right? Sometimes is a mixture of, yes, there's a lot of talent, but there's a lot that goes into the networking part as well, unfortunately or fortunately. So it goes to say, like, yeah, make lots of friends, always be curious, always try to keep an open mind and pursue that, and let your curiosity fuel your passion pretty much. Yeah.
Cool. Yes, I agree with a lot of what Mei-Ling just said. Also, on the side note, we're getting a lot of questions on the chat, but we're going to address, we're going to have like the question kind of section later on in this talk. So let's just kind of remember your questions and repost them later when we're having the Q&A session. Not exactly sure how that part is going to go, but we'll deal with it when the time comes. But yes, like what Mei-Ling said, I completely agree with her that there is. It's important to kind of network and find people and let people know that you exist and let people know who you are. I think there's a common theme that runs throughout all the stories, our cool origin stories, basically. That everyone has like this kind of grit and persistence and almost a little bit of foolhardiness about us. Like Zong basically just tried to get, like, can I use Guilty Gear characters, and that turned into a job opportunity. Hui was like, I'm got to get into the Japan US and I've got to go there and try to learn as much about game dev as possible. Mei-Ling is basically just going from one game designer job to another, and a lot of us basically aren't really, like, a lot of the things, there's a little bit of luck, but then they've always said that luck favors the prepared. So I've gotten a few questions before this because I teach a lot and I've gotten a lot of questions regarding the idea of, like, okay, how do you get into a company? And a question that among one student asked me, okay, so I've prepared like this letter that I'm going to mass send to like 100 game companies. And I'm like, please don't do that. That is going to completely screw up your chances and you will never get into a single one of them. You will not hear back. One of the things that I recommend young developers to do is that spend a week at least for each of the companies that you want to apply for. I spent a week preparing for my submission to for my application to Paradox. I think and within that time I did my research. I mean, before that, I really liked Paradox. Like, I love all their games. I played everything from Crusader Kings 2 to Hearts of Iron to Stellaris, even the stuff that they published, like Battletech. So I have a lot of knowledge of the stuff they've made. But also, I've kind of did some research into where the company is going. Why are they looking for designers? Where do I fit? And a lot of these things before I started my application. So every application is actually tailored to the company that I apply for. And I think in my opinion, at least, the benchmark is about 1 week for each company. Like, take a week, find out everything you can about the company before you apply for it. I think that will increase your chances by a lot. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has anything to add to this.
I think I can interject, but this is probably, after you've gotten a foot in the door. Sometimes it pays to also, just apply for jobs that you're not sure if you're going to get, or if you're not sure you're necessarily interested in, because that will probably give you an opportunity to be able to practice your interview skills as well, right? Like, you want to be able to ramp up and build up your skill, just like everything else. The way that you present yourself, the way that you present your points are super important, and you don't want that one single shot and the first time you're doing it to be with the dream company that you're with, right? So take the opportunity as well to practice your interview skills. Just go, right? Like, when people call you on site for an interview, don't just say, like, well, I'm not so interested. No, go for the experience. Practice your skills, practice being good at promoting yourself, at being able to negotiate as well. And who knows, right? Like, maybe you'll end up liking the people that you're having a conversation with, and it's like, well, I didn't think I would enjoy this job, but now that I've met key members of the team, I'm like, that might be pretty interesting. So yeah, that's like another thing to add to building up your confidence as well once you to get the job that you want.
Yes, that's a very good point. That Mei Ling has just put. Yeah, like what she said, like just go for interviews if you and failing is not a bad thing. You learn a lot from failing. Like going to an interview and having the interviewer says, yeah, we'll call you back, and they don't. Then you can go back and review and go like, okay, what could I have done better? How could I have expressed myself better? What are the things that I didn't like about that interview? And the next time you go for an interview, and the next time you go for an interview, and the next time you go to an interview, you could keep getting better. And you keep becoming a little bit more natural, a lot easier to express yourself, like what Mei Ling said. Very cool. Moving on to our next kind of section. We're all kind of spread out all over the world, right? And I think this sort of cast of guests is specifically chosen because we are everywhere. Like we represent Japan, US, Canada, and Europe. So it's like, okay, so how's the dev atmosphere there? The game dev atmosphere there different from Southeast Asia? How's it different from Singapore? How's it different from Malaysia? Let's start with Zong, who is in Japan right now, where a lot of our favorite games growing up are made. So how is it different working in Japan?
Test.
Yes.
So in Japan is pretty different from what I experienced in Ubisoft. They have Japan likes to follow lots of order and hierarchy procedure. So there's lots of approval that needs to take place. And on top of that, they have this called Horenso, which is basically Hokoku, Tenaku, and Sodan. In English, it's so basically it's like a mini scrum, but it takes place really often, and you need to communicate with your superior pretty often. But while in Ubisoft or indie companies, the hierarchy tends to be flat, and you can talk to anyone regarding your idea, which is quite this is very different from Japan.
So if I understand it correctly, like in Japan, there's like a scheduled time to talk to your superiors. Like
No.
be outside of it. Oh, sorry.
No. As in, before making decision, you need to communicate with your superiors pretty often.
Okay, that's what you meant, right? Cool. So that kind of structure, do you think it's something that is good? It's something that is sort of, does it help you?
I think
that hierarchy.
It's good point and bad point. It's like the good points are you get to see various issues before it even occur, but the bad point is that like sometimes things can drag a long time if let's say your superior is busy and have no time to look at it. You need to wait until he has time to talk about it in order to push the ideas through.
When you said that you can see problems before they occur, can you elaborate more on that?
Because your superior might, your senior might have done this before, and programming wise, they might have caused certain bugs in the past, so they can point out, oh, if you do this, the game might crash, and there's a better way to do it. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I think that also is kind of why they kind of do it in Japan, because of the idea that you respect seniors more in the Asian kind of context, is because we always know that the older person has something to share, wisdom to share to the younger developers. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about it with Dehui. So Dehui is working in the US, which is like probably very different from Japan. Can you talk about your experience?
Yeah, interestingly, I'm like the complete opposite. I think when I first came to the US, I was pretty shocked by how non-hierarchical it is. Like, I mean, I have a lead, and my boss is great, but like I was very shocked by how friendly he is, and like that's something that I had to get used to. Like I remember I would go to my tech director's office and I would just go and be like, hey, and then he will say, how's it going? And I'll just talk over him because I'm like not used to making this small talk. So yeah, it's really quite different. And yeah, I mean, compared to like having to, talk to my boss or my seniors about making decisions, like I'm actually the complete opposite, where it's very autonomous here. And like in my experience, like it seems like we're given a lot of trust to just do what we need to do. Yeah, it's very different from both Zonghui's experience and I think probably the Southeast Asian experience too.
When you talk about the independence and the kind of trust, do you think it helps you in developing games?
Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, to me, it feels like, first of all, being autonomous and having this trust in me, it makes me more happy as an individual. Like, I have more space to explore my own, and like, I'm not, someone's not always breathing down my neck, and that's great. But I think more than that, like, giving you space to make mistakes is important. I think that's actually, yeah, and yeah, I think it's good to have space to learn and explore on your own instead of always having to like have a safety net or something. Yeah,
I guess it gives you more ownership of the product you're working on.
Yeah, ownership is also definitely a big deal. Yeah, I was very surprised by the amount of stuff that I was owned, and like when lead programmers would ask me about things, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Like I really do own this, and that's I think it's good in terms of sort of morale and also in terms of learning. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's a great thing, especially if you're working on a certain feature and then to them you are the expert of that feature. Mm-hmm. And even no matter how high up the hierarchy they are, they will come in and ask you for your opinion about stuff. That's great. Mm-hmm. Right. And finally, of course, Ling, you are in a place in Canada that speaks French. That has always been very confusing to me. But how is it life over there? Like, is there a culture shock when you go over there?
So I think the whole like plunge into French didn't start when I moved here to Montreal. I had spent a year in Paris, which was a bigger culture shock. So right. I hardly spoke French when I landed. I couldn't even order coffee with confidence because everyone spoke so fast. So it's almost like, when you know only 2 words and then you try to flex your knowledge, and then suddenly someone just unloads on you and I'm like, oh god, I don't know how to respond because I don't know what you're saying. So that like I think like the bigger shock was when I moved first from Singapore to Paris. So when I came to Montreal, it was less of a shock because it's highly bilingual in the city. When at work, I started working in Montreal at Ubisoft Montreal first, and you have teams that are the first language is French, so people kind of like tend to lapse into French sometimes when they forget, or they're not mindful that there are anglophones there, and then they forget and they're like, oh, sorry, then they switch back to English. But that being said, I'm very fortunate in the sense that I don't have to work in French, so I don't need to speak business level French. I can speak French that is day to day, really probably broken. I have the vocabulary of like a 5-year-old, but I'm not expected to be to operate with the language. But yeah, I think that, like Hui, I had the same issue of like the biggest thing to get over is communication styles, right? Like having to make small talk, or being expected to make small talk before you jump into the very thing that you approach someone to speak about. I still trip on that sometimes, and I'm like, I poke someone and immediately like jump into the thing, and the person's reply is like, how are you? How was your week? And I was like, oh crap, I just unloaded on you. So sorry. So yeah, there's that. Like the flat hierarchy amongst team members is something that I've really grown to appreciate as well. I think, you know, being able to openly speak about sometimes very sensitive or tender topics is something that you know, I've really grown to appreciate. You know, being able to really articulate reasons behind why we implement things the way that they are in our design is something that was, you know, fairly refreshing, right? Like we've moved away from being comfortable with inheriting existing designs without questioning like why they were done a certain way to begin with, to really questioning like, do we need to do things this way, right? Just because we've done this 100 times doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right way to do things. Being able to articulate that, to question that, and to bring that to light is something that has kind of changed the way that I think, the way that I also approach the things that I work on as a game developer. So that is something that, you know, I saw a shift when I moved out from Southeast Asia, which I guess doesn't count as a culture shock, but I guess it's like a mindset change. So
yeah. I completely agree. The idea that like there's some things that are quite subtle that changes, and I think it changes your way of thinking about things and problems as opposed to back in Southeast Asia. I can share a bit about this as well. Like I think when I was working in Singapore, Singaporeans, I don't know about Malaysians, but Singaporeans are very results driven, right? So a lot of the things that we do, we always talk a lot about efficiency. We want to get it done, right? So we don't actually have, I don't remember having a lot of time to kind of step back and think through a problem. We want a solution quickly, very fast. So we would have a problem and we go like, okay, how do we solve this? And then the first solution that we find, we usually would just like, okay, let's go with that. And then we start paying the price later on because we didn't really kind of think through the problem. We're like, oh, okay, why is this problem even coming up? Is this problem really the problem? Or is there a problem underneath it? And I think when I came over to Europe, the first thing that the culture shock, so to speak, that I got was that we would take time to deliberate things. Like when there's a problem, like we would go like, okay, wait, there seems to be this problem. What is the root cause of this problem? What is causing this issue? Is there a larger issue at hand? And I remember it being a big thing for me when I first arrived here, which is like I couldn't like understand why people had to go for walks along the river and think about things. And I'm like, isn't that a waste of time? Couldn't you just be in front of a screen and like PowerPoint or a spreadsheet this through, right? Like numbers and then fix the stuff. But I realized the value of that. I realized the value of rest, of like letting your mind kind of like take a break and then ponder the question through properly. And then having maybe like a follow-up sync later on or in the next day or the next week even, and really kind of solve the issue properly. And it's something that it's very, I don't know if it applies to the rest of the countries in Europe, but it's very Swedish in that sense. And just to kind of reiterate what Ming said, like, I had a huge problem with small talk when I came here as well. And my biggest problem is, when do you stop? When is too much small talk a bad thing? Because everyone here knows how much small talk is socially acceptable. I don't. I didn't grow up here, right? So when they go, how was your weekend? I would start to rant. I would go like, this is on Saturday. This is what I did in the morning. And then after that, I did this in the afternoon. And then halfway through, you could tell they were bored. And I was like, wait, I think this is not what they meant when they said, how was your day or how was your weekend? They wanted a summary. I'm slowly getting it now. Okay, so I would go like, how was your weekend? I would say, good. There was one interesting thing that happened and that was this. But other than that, it was good. And then they'll be happy with that. That's like a good middle ground. So yes, is there a call? Oh, Cheryl, are you calling me on a on a separate line? Why are you calling me? Okay.
It took bloody long.
Okay. So that was a reminder. Okay, I'm gonna cut myself short. Okay, so and I have more things to say, but I guess I'll leave it for later. Yes, let's move on to the next question. Yes. Okay, so like everyone has kind of like shared, right? So we have all this kind of experience overseas has kind of expanded our horizons and perspectives on game development. So I don't know if there's something that you can kind of share with your fellow game devs back home, whether it's Singapore or is it Malaysia, something that you feel can help us improve locally as a game dev community. Mei Ling, let's start with you. As a senior designer in Google Stadia, is there any nuggets of wisdom that you can talk about or share?
I think, as a whole, there's a lot of potential in the Southeast Asian games industry for sure, right? Like I came from there, so it's like this is like a weird flex, but no, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of very, very skilled people in the industry, and I think that what's necessarily missing is their voices, being part of that environment, right? Like we need more diverse voices, we need more diverse viewpoints in helping us grow and build products that are hopefully less homogenous, right? Like we've seen stories being told multiple times from a certain viewpoint, but we're missing authentic and properly represented voices that is commercially successful and has a wide reach from this part of the world. And what is probably the missing link there is the opportunities being extended to local developers, right? I think we're gradually building up our exposure. We're gradually building up our hard skills in the region, but someone needs to be able to extend the collaboration opportunities to the devs in Southeast Asia. And we talked about the impact of COVID, right? This global pandemic on the industry as a whole, and we're seeing that cause a huge shift in how we build products. Previously it's super important to have hundreds of people on site in a studio somewhere in the world building games together. But then, with the case of Terhui, for example, he's in Singapore building games for a studio in LA. It shows that this is possible, that the opportunity to be able to extend collaborations between local devs in Southeast Asia and studios that are based in more established countries, like that collaboration is possible, right? And these more mature market has been around for much longer. They've had a longer partnership with the local government, which has given these studios opportunities to grow to the sizes and the sizes that they are currently. Southeast Asia is gradually picking up, but this is what's missing in that space. Not for the lack of talent, not for the lack of skills, but opportunities to collaborate with each other, to hopefully be able to have a bigger platform to showcase the products, to showcase what they're building actually. So yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. I think we definitely could use a lot more opportunities for the younger devs here to grow. And you mentioned Dehui's situation, which is extremely interesting, right? So technically, he is working in Singapore for Respawn on Apex Legends, which is like a really interesting situation. We actually talk about that in a little bit in the next part of this talk. So let's leave that for then. But Dehui, you mentioned the trust and independence kind of afforded to you by superiors. Do you think devs here would we kind of benefit from that kind of autonomy or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I mentioned before, like it's something that's been very beneficial to me, both as in terms of how I enjoy my job and how I grow as well. I think um, getting the trust to own features and make mistakes is really important and really allows you to learn, because right, that's the only way that you'll see whether something works or not. Like if you see some sort of design pattern or something and you want to try it in programming or some sort of thing, right, some sort of concept, you apply it and then you see down the road, like in a year or two, did that work out, did that not work out, and that's how you learn. And I think it's very, very valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Also, I'd like to hear a bit of thoughts from Zong about what have you kind of learned from Japan? The way that they would develop games there. How can we learn from that in Southeast Asia? Zong
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So from my case, I guess make use of your language and connections. Like if you're outsourcing, I mean, because Singaporeans know several language, try to look for staff from different region that cater to the kind of assets that you want to create. So when I say make use of your language, it doesn't just mean like translation work or something. I mean like get more connections, find more sources to develop your game. And because like even in this COVID situation, you can, for game development, you can pretty much work online as well.
Right.
So it's easy to collaborate online.
Yeah, the idea of like third-party companies, they're a big thing in Japan, right?
Yeah. In Japan, there's like different kind of outsourced company that you can go to. You can just find companies to make models for you or animations or even songs. And it's not just a few companies, they have like different choices you can choose from, and you can look one that fits the game, the type of game that you want to make.
And they don't even kind of stick to Japan. Like I know they have outsourced studios all over the world. Some of them are even in Malaysia. Like I don't know if Mei-Ling, you know any of these third-party studios and how they work.
I think that Malaysia has seen a huge growth of these large-scale outsourcing companies who are, almost becoming a staple, right? Like they've worked on so many interesting and huge AAA titles, and I think it's a great way to get a foot in the door, right? Like we see a lot of Malaysian developers having in their portfolios worked on incredible games like StarCraft or Uncharted, and it is a stepping stone essentially to leveraging and building up the skill sets of the local industry. And like what you had touched on earlier, I think that's probably the gradual missing link that allows us to be able to bridge the industries here in this region with the Western region essentially, right? Like now we see a lot more transference of knowledge, not just in the hard skills, which is one part of it, but like managing larger teams, scaling up operations, optimizing pipelines within the studios, preparing them essentially for what it would be like to run a huge studio in a local setting. And I think that having this sorts of ecosystem setup is super, super important, right? Because then you're fostering healthy competition amongst all these different studios as well, right? You're not only stuck with one company monopolizing the market, and they set salary standards, they set working condition standards, they set benefit standards. But then when you have healthy competition, then you allow your developers to grow, you allow them to be able to understand their market worth as well. So I think that there's definitely a huge benefit to seeing the industry grow in that side of things.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, sorry. Hello.
Yep. Yes, Cheryl. Yes, hello.
Xuan Ming, you have like 10 minutes for Q&A.
Yes,
really overshot.
I was kind of expecting we were overshot anyway. So yes, I had more questions, but I think I want to give the floor to the audience. But I don't know how we're going to do this. Are we going to do it with chat
I have
or?
questions, as in
Yeah.
I've taken down all the questions. So I think since the target audience, a lot of them are students, right? We try
When
to
you're very
shift the
soft.
questions. Sorry, we're trying to shift the questions to something more industry related. So Elijah just asked to any of the panelists, would you have any advice for someone who does not have a games industry background / opportunity to go to DigiPen that is looking for a career transition?
Okay.
Like if you don't have game industry background, how do you do a career transition?
Well, it depends on what role I think he's trying to apply for. Did he say?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, you guys can take it first.
So, can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I didn't graduate from DigiPen or have any gaming industry background when I first started. I just made games on my own during my holiday. I graduated from engineering school in NTU. So, I think your background doesn't matter as long as you work on something. Like a lot of people join this industry and say they have a passion, but they don't have any proof or thing to show this passion thing they have. So I guess if you really want to work on the industry, have proof of your passion.
Yes, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I also didn't graduate with a gaming degree. I think the only one are the ones that are the diplomas that are offered by SP and TP and Nanyang Poly and DigiPen. The rest of them are general degrees. Like I have a fine arts, for Bachelor of Fine Arts from ADM, and I didn't have any gaming specific degree. But yes, exactly like Zhonghui, I had a whole bunch of indie games that I made by myself. And I use that to kind of get jobs. And what he says is 100% correct. Like the idea, like it's very easy to say that you have a passion for games, but to prove it, it's like a lot of people just go, oh, I've made this game, but then you're like, okay, when do you make it? I made it for a class where everyone else was supposed to make a game. And you're like, okay, well, I don't know. I guess it's still cool, but in a way, like if you come up to somebody and go like, okay, I spent all my hours and nights making this really cool game that I think is really awesome, and I really want you to take a look at it. I will be a lot more impressed if you did it entirely of your own initiative, like Zhonghui has done with his Mega Man X Street Fighter game. That was really impressive to me as well. Yes, anybody else in the panel wants to talk about this?
Yeah, I think you know, both of you have covered that point super well, right? Like even here in Montreal, we have a lot of interest from people who, you know, never went to school specifically for games development, and we have sort of like a nonprofit here that I work with that, you know, we get a lot of interest from women who want to break into the games industry but have never had the opportunities to. So, you know, the same advice is what we tell them, right? Like build up your portfolio to showcase your passion, right? Like whether it's, you know, building games in the game engine, you're using, you know, level design or level editors to, you know, design your own levels, to try out game mechanics, etc. We want to be able to see your passion showcased into something, right? It may be unpolished, but we want to see your thought process going into it. We want to be able to see that passion translate into something tangible. It might not be work related, but it's just like, yeah, you cannot showcase your hobby or your talent if you have nothing to show for it. So yeah, pad your portfolio and your resume with as much of that as you can.
I just want to add a quick thing. First, I think not only is working on games on the side important, but make sure you finish it. Like finishing a game and pushing out the door is very, very important, and you learn a lot from finishing it. Secondly, just want to add sort of engineering perspective. I think in school you learn a lot about concepts and stuff like that, but you really, I think for me, I really only, these concepts really solidified themselves when I wrote a game engine, like wrote a math library, wrote function pointers and like buttons that take function pointers, all that thing. Like that's what really solidified that. And so I think these are really important, and they really will get you to learn and learn these concepts properly. So yeah, that's what I would say if you are trying to break in.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of good points. There's also inside the chat that I was reading. I think this is really good points as well. Yeah, like I also because I used to kind of help with the hiring process in BoomZap, and one of the things that I think we won't know is what's your current like situation at home. Like if you're a breadwinner, you no time to make games outside of class. Like we wouldn't know that. But what we see is a whole bunch of portfolios that are coming from like the same graduating batch with all the same games, because they've all been given the same brief. And then as somebody who's kind of supposed to go through like hundreds of applications and figure out which stands out, like from my point of view, you should be able to see like how like I made this in class is a bad thing, because you're gonna have the same kind of brief from with a lot of other applicants, because you're all graduating at the same time, all applying to jobs at the same time, especially if you're applying for jobs in Singapore. Yeah, so that's actually like, I like to clarify that. It's not like I've had anything against people who make cool games in class, because I am a teacher and I try to make my students make cool games in class. But ultimately, if those games are the only ones you have, then you don't have that much of an itch as when competing with other people that are graduating with you.
Okay, so I think we have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
One from both from Kero, right? One is for Sonic. How do you spend your time at work when you're waiting for approval from your bosses? Do you work on other features?
Yes, I work on other stuff. So I try to have lots of tasks beforehand, so that I can wait on certain tasks. And what's the other question again?
The other question is actually for Hui.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you think the autonomy from Western working styles slows down overall production?
Does it what? Sorry, say again?
Does it slows down? Okay, so
does it
the
slow down?
autonomy, yeah, does the autonomy from Western working styles slow down overall production?
I think there is I think, yeah, maybe there's this feeling in that like, oh, if you're not always pushing people, then they won't do their best work. But I think that's actually opposite. Like, I think the truth is that if you give people space, that's when they'll I think that's when they'll do the best work. I think part of it is also there's this philosophy that if you rush code work, right, you're just going to pay for it down the line, right? Technical debt is obviously a phrase that people have heard all the time, and it's true. Like if you say that, please get this feature done by X date, there are going to be bugs, right? If you have the time and autonomy to do your own stuff, and obviously it's not like completely autonomous. You still have to tell your manager, oh, sorry, this will not make this date. But they are never going to be like, oh, no, cannot, you must go ahead and finish it or whatever, right? So yeah, I think it actually does in the long run speed things up. Maybe in specific milestones it might not, but yeah, overall it's definitely, I feel more productive. Yeah.
Okay. To Mei-Ling from Daniel Ray, how much does networking matter, especially as a game/narrative designer looking for jobs in the UK/US?
I think networking does play a pretty big part, right? Because you will rely on those connections to be able to open up more doors for you over time. And it does sadly also point out that, as people who are very, very new to the industry, you're disadvantaged because you don't have the same access as someone who's a lot more senior. And then if you're both competing for the same job, then yeah, like there is a disadvantage there. So that's why I'm very much on the fence on, strongly only leveraging networking. But the good thing about having everything online right now, right? Everyone seems to be within reach, right? Like if you were following someone interesting or influential on Twitter, nothing's stopping you geographically from being able to reach out to that person, right? Being able to poke them and say, hey, I'm super interested with what you're doing. Do you have a moment? Can I ask you questions? most developers are more than happy to, talk about their experiences and things like that. So, we're no longer just relying on traditional means of being in close proximity of people in order to be able to network, use and leverage every platform you have online, and being able to reach out to people. Another way of, having a better presence as well sometimes is, like offering your services, volunteering at events, right? This is a good way that you also broaden your horizons and you get to network as well, not just with peers, but people above your rank or people below you. But these are lots of different means that you can expand your networking capabilities outside of what is more traditional means. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. Yeah, networking is super important, but it's not the only thing, and you must know how to network. Yeah. Okay, so to all panelists from Chuan Ka Tui, when is the point that you feel that you're good enough to try getting into the company you're in?
When? Well, you're never really good enough. I guess that's not for you to decide. That is for the person that's hiring you to decide. Like, I don't think I am good enough for, I don't know, like what I'm doing now, but apparently everybody else seems to think so. So that's how I got my job. Like, you apply for it, aim higher than what you think you are, and then you go like, okay, I think I can do this job. I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna try to apply for it, and then I apply for it, and then they will come in and go like, I want to interview you, and they'll ask you questions. Yes, imposter syndrome is definitely real. Like, I suffering from it like every day. And then they'll ask you questions, and then they'll go like, you seem to be the right person for the job. And the first thing I said to them, which was I regret it, but I was like, the first thing I said after they say that they will hire me was like, really? I didn't believe it, that they were like, oh, would you? Okay, that was kind of cool. And then but you slowly kind of learn that you will always think you're not good until you are, and the only way to find out is to attempt it.
Yes, so true. Double down on the point of don't make the decision for them. Let them make the decision for themselves. Just go for the job that you want anyway. Don't censor yourself because of that.
Yeah, when I first joined Arc System Works, I don't even know much Japanese. But my recommendation for anyone who wants to join, please try to learn Japanese before coming.
Sorry, I know time's up. I just had a quick thing to say. I think something I tell myself when I go for interviews is you're not trying to trick them into hiring someone that you're not. You're just trying to demonstrate who you are. So yeah, just demonstrate who you are with your abilities and then see if they want you. Like that's all you can do.